Now to the next item of business, a statement by Ash Denham on promoting the safe and appropriate use of fireworks in Scotland. The Minister will of course take questions at the end of her statement. I would encourage all members who wish to ask a question to press their request to speak button. And I call on the Minister, Ash Denham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I welcome this opportunity to update Parliament on the actions that this Government will take to promote the safe and appropriate use of fireworks in Scotland. So let me first begin by acknowledging the positive role that fireworks can play in bringing our communities together. And the enjoyment of attending displays in a safe environment can be a wonderful experience and can add magic to any celebration. I enjoy fireworks displays myself, as I'm sure many of my colleagues across the chamber do as well. But my message today is about keeping people safe and ensuring that fireworks are used responsibly and at the right time and in the right place. And so to achieve this, the Scottish Government is keen to work with both the fireworks industry, with partners, with communities, and to support the promotion and access to well-run organised displays. And so for the second year, a list of organised public events across Scotland has been published by the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service on their website. And I'd encourage anybody looking to enjoy fireworks over the coming weekend and on the 5th of November to do so at one of these events. However, over recent years, it's become increasingly clear that our relationship with fireworks is not all positive. And there have been reports of antisocial behaviour on and around bonfire night, attacks against our emergency services, and disturbing and distressing accounts from individuals about the inappropriate use of fireworks. And this has been happening in our different constituencies across the country. And it's meant that public services across Scotland have had to dedicate large amounts of time and also resources to keep people safe. So we're now exactly 1 week away from bonfire night, and I can't overstate the huge amount of pre-planning and preventative activity that has been undertaken at a national and also at a local level. I met earlier this month with senior commanders in both Police Scotland and in the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and they provided reassurance that all that can be done in preparation for bonfire night is being done, and that a robust multi-agency systems are in place across the country. And this includes multi-agency command centres in Edinburgh and in Glasgow, and a national coordination unit that will review and command activity across the rest of the country. Following on from the experiences of last year, resources will be targeted in the communities of Glasgow, Edinburgh and West Lothian. And a significant amount of work has been undertaken with those communities and local partners in recent months. The line is clear from our police, from our prosecutors and our courts, and they will deal robustly with anyone who offends. Those charged with attacks against our emergency service workers can expect to face up to life imprisonment, an unlimited fine, or both. And again, I'm sure all of you will join with me in giving our support to the emergency services and applauding the significant amount of work that they put in at this time of year, each and every year. But prevention is, of course, better than a cure, and the importance of community engagement in the run-up to bonfire night to share messages and to clarify the rules and regulations continues. Our emergency services, along with a number of other partners, have been delivering campaigns on this, and the Scottish Government has this year worked with Crime Stoppers to run a targeted campaign in key communities. I attended one of these areas, Pollokshields in Glasgow, just 2 weeks ago, where I saw local police and also Glasgow City Council engaging positively with young people to highlight the impact and the consequences that fireworks misuse has in their communities. As members across this chamber will be aware, earlier this year I launched a national public consultation to gather the experiences, the ideas and the views of the people of Scotland. The consultation ran for 14 weeks and 16,420 responses were received. And in fact, over 7,000 responses were received just within the first 24 hours of it going live. So I'm sure the Parliament will agree that there is a significant level of public engagement on this, and it clearly demonstrates that the sale and the use of fireworks is of interest to people across the country. The public consultation was supported also by 29 public events. And I'd like to take this opportunity to extend my thanks to everyone who was involved in these discussions and for sharing their views and their experiences. So what did we learn through the consultation? Well, overwhelmingly, people want change. Almost all of those who responded to the consultations, that was 94%, said they welcomed increased controls on the sale of fireworks, many calling for an outright ban on the sale to the general public. And most of those who responded, so that's 92%, felt that there should be more control over the use of fireworks. Now, recognising that a consultation is, of course, self-selecting, in order to ensure that the 16,420 views could be confidently presented as the voice of Scotland, a separate and complementary statistically representative opinion poll was also undertaken, and that told us much the same thing. So 71% of people want more control over the sale of fireworks, 68% were in support of more controls over how they were used, and 58% would support an all-out ban on the sale to the general public. So taken together, these results are conclusive. People in Scotland want to see change. We've heard about the distress that can be caused to animals, often leading to injury, and the Scottish SPCA have told us that animals will panic, they'll flee at the sound of fireworks and loud bangs, and that can also result in injury both to the animals and also sometimes cause road traffic accidents. We've heard how the noise of fireworks can often result in anxiety and stress to those with noise sensitivity, including people with autism. This is sometimes described as an onslaught of noise that can cause difficulty for some people, especially autistic people. We heard that bonfire night can also be a difficult time for our armed forces veterans, with the loud bangs, the lights, the strong smells causing considerable anguish for many. And we also heard strongly about the need to remain cautious to the real danger that fireworks can pose if they're not used in a safe and appropriate way. And it is a fact that most firework-related injuries occur at private displays, such as those in our own back gardens, and that it is our young people who are at most risk of injury. The sale of fireworks is, of course, a reserved matter, but I should say that if we did have powers, reflecting the majority view of the public in both the consultation and in the national survey, I would seek to implement tougher curbs on fireworks sales, including potentially a ban on the general sale. But in the meantime, I have personally written to the UK government regularly over the last year to keep them updated on the consultation, and I wrote again at the start of October. And I recently received a positive response from Kelly Tolhurst MP, who is the Minister for Small Business, Consumers and Corporate Responsibility. So I'll be pursuing, and I look forward to further discussion with Ms Tolhurst. I want Scotland to be leading the way on this, but I would welcome an opportunity to start a discussion with the UK government about how Scotland can be given the power to introduce comprehensive changes to the sale of fireworks in our country. On the 7th of October, I hosted a roundtable with representatives from the fireworks industry, emergency services, local authorities, NHS and other key stakeholders. And, Presiding Officer, I heard a strong willingness to work together to implement any changes. And so it's with this in mind that I've published today the action plan promoting the safe and appropriate use of fireworks in Scotland. And the action plan sets out a number of activities, short, medium and longer term, that will collectively implement a change in our relationship with fireworks. So these actions include communications campaigns to be run across Scotland, some of which I've mentioned already this afternoon, the development of advice and guidance at point of sale, and to support communities looking to undertake organised displays, and support and engagement directly with local communities most affected by the antisocial behaviour from fireworks. However, let me be clear, whilst vital, information and advice alone will not be enough to deliver transformation in the use of fireworks in Scotland. And it is my intention to introduce legislative change, and it's for that reason that I can confirm that I will establish a firework review group, and I'm delighted to be able to announce that this group will be chaired by Alistair Hay, former Chief Officer of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. The group will be invited to consider a range of options, including the opportunity to introduce restrictions on the use of fireworks on private property, the opportunity to tighten the dates and times that fireworks could be set off, and the opportunity to introduce no firework areas or zones, as well as explore any other options that arise from their consideration of ideas. I'll agree the final remit and membership of the group with Mr Hay, but I anticipate that it will include key stakeholders, including the fireworks industry. The group will operate for a period of up to 9 months, and it will present its final recommendations to me in the summer next year. And I'll be delighted, obviously, to report back to Parliament at that stage with the recommendations. So in closing, I'd like to personally pass on my gratitude to each and every member of our emergency services, to the public and third sector services, as well as those in our communities who volunteer their spare time. Let me wish everyone a safe and enjoyable bonfire night, but let me be clear that this government has intentions to change our relationship with fireworks in Scotland, and I believe that this action plan that I've published today will help us to work towards achieving that aim.
Thank you very much. We'll now take questions. The first one from Maurice Corrie.
Presiding Officer, thank you. I thank the Minister for advice sight of her statement. The Scottish Conservatives agree that there is a balance to be struck between safe enjoyment of fireworks and robust regulation to prevent antisocial and illegal behaviour. We will work with both of Scotland's governments to seek consensus on what further steps should be taken. Can I join the Minister also in paying tribute to our very brave emergency services? I would like to pay credit to my colleague Liam Kerr, who has been tirelessly campaigning for better support and protection of our emergency services workers. And I would ask the Minister for an update on the calls he made last year for further rollout of body-worn cameras and for the gap to be closed in the law that prevents police searching for and seizing fireworks. With my long-standing interest in the well-being of our veterans in Scotland, I would ask the Minister to provide further details of how the Scottish Government plans to support our former Armed Forces personnel in relation to the antisocial use of fireworks. And finally, can the Minister provide further detail on the content of the Scottish Government's advice and guidance at the point of sale material? Thank you.
Minister.
I'm glad that the Scottish Conservatives are agreeing with this, and I'm very grateful to have your support in looking at the ways that we can move forward with this. Obviously, inevitably, due to the fact that this is quite a complicated relationship here between what is reserved and what is devolved, but I think we can all agree that the public are supportive of tighter restrictions on the sale of fireworks. So if the Scottish Conservatives are willing to work with me on this, obviously we need to speak to the UK Government. I am quite committed to driving forward the change that we need to see in order to change Scotland's relationship with fireworks. I obviously want to keep people safe. Obviously, I did mention it in my statement that obviously there is an impact here to veterans, and I'm glad that the member has also mentioned that in his statement. And I'm very keen as well that Scotland is leading the way on this issue, as I think it is an important issue that does affect many of us in our communities. The member mentioned attacks on our emergency services. Let me be clear again, Presiding Officer, that any attacks on our emergency services with fireworks or indeed with any other weapon are completely unacceptable. And I am committed to driving forward any action needed in order to ensure that our emergency services are kept safe. Obviously, this Parliament did bring in the Emergency Workers Act in 2005. We obviously extended that in 2008. That has important protections in criminal law for emergency service workers. Obviously, I would remind the Chamber it was opposed at the time by the Scottish Conservatives. But just to say that I'm grateful for the Conservative support on this issue, and I'm glad to see that they are getting behind us on this. So thank you for that.
James Kelly to be followed by Tom Arthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Thank the Minister for advanced sight of the statement. Scottish Labour welcomes the statement and the setting up of the Firework Review Group. The Minister is right that firework displays properly organised can be excellent community events that people can turn out to enjoy. However, there have been increasing incidents of recent years where there's been disorder, and that's caused anxiety and fear amongst the general public. In relation to the attacks on service workers, I think it's a particular concern that we've seen a rise in 4 regions throughout Scotland of attacks on firefighters. In Glasgow in particular, there have been 23 attacks in the last year, and that's completely unacceptable that people turning out to protect the public are subject to attack. So can I ask the Minister what specific actions are going to be taken in the run-in to November the 5th to support the protection of fire workers and other emergency workers?
Minister.
I thank the member for that question. I think he raised a number of important points there, and I also thank him for welcoming the review group. That's very grateful. I think he's right to point out that there have been an increase in incidents of attacks on our emergency service workers, and he mentions specifically firefighters there. So I think that is, in part, at least what has driven my interest in having a look at this issue, in having the consultation, to gain the views of the people of Scotland, to let them have their voice on this particular issue, to obviously let their voices be heard on this. So I think the action plan does lay out a number of actions that we're taking on this. So we obviously have the short-term actions, the medium-term ones, and then the review group would fall into the longer-term actions, obviously in creating a legislative framework that would change our relationship with fireworks. But certainly in the short term, obviously we're coming up to the bonfire season now, and in fact in some constituencies I've heard already there is some antisocial behaviour beginning as a result of that. We have undertaken targeted interventions into certain areas. As the members mentioned, there are certain areas in Scotland where this type of activity is much more prevalent. So we've taken note of that. I have met with senior members of Police Scotland, senior members of the Fire Service, to look at the way that we were planning in advance of Bonfire Night. It's clearly one of the busiest nights for the emergency services, and they have assured me that they have put into place planning and targeted interventions, and that includes preventative activity, and we're also running the awareness campaigns as well. So we want to be clear with people that this type of targeting of emergency service workers is not acceptable, and that anybody that does get involved in that sort of activity over this period will be dealt with very robustly.
Tom Arthur, to be followed by Liam MacArthur.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I thank the Minister for her statement and welcome the publication of the action plan. I can also thank all of the emergency services who will be working to keep my constituents in Renfrewshire South safe over the coming week. In her statement, the Minister stated that prevention is better than the cure. And to that end, the Minister will be aware that a number of supermarkets have recently either banned the sale of fireworks in their stores or restricted their sales to low-noise fireworks only. Does the Minister welcome this, and does she agree that this is a step in the right direction to keeping our communities safe from fireworks misuse? Minister.
I do welcome that move by Sainsbury's to stop selling fireworks in all of its 2,300 UK stores this season. I note that the reason for this move was confirmed by Sainsbury's as being commercially sensitive, but I would like to pass on my support to Sainsbury's, and if any part of their decision was based on some of the themes that came out of the consultation, so the safety of communities and the impact on animals and so on. I'd also be very keen to meet up with Sainsbury's, other supermarkets and retailers to discuss this issue and how we move forward, and also to share with them some of the messages that came out of the consultation.
Liam MacArthur, to be followed by Sinead Robertson.
Thank you. President Officer, can I thank the Minister for early sight of her statement, welcome the establishment of the review group and commend the appointment of Alistair Hay as the chair of that review group. The Minister talked about the prospect of bringing forward legislation. I wonder whether she could inform the Chamber whether she expects that to be during the course of this Parliament. And in considering new controls, does the Minister envisage these being given to councils so that the decisions can be made closest to the communities most directly affected?
Minister.
I'm glad that the member also welcomes the setting up of the review group. I think we can all agree that some of the work done by local authorities is extremely important in the run-up to Bonfire Night. I myself have seen some of the prevention and diversionary work that's undertaken by them. They put an awful lot of effort into this, and it's very important work that they're doing to that. With regard to timing, which was an issue that the member raised, I think everyone in the Chamber would agree that creating the appropriate legislative framework is not something that we would want to rush. We want to take our time to make sure we get this right. So I'm pursuing a kind of a dual-strand approach here, where the review group will look at the options that are available and on the table, if you like, for the Scottish Government. They will look at all the options on that, and they will come back with recommendations to me around about next summer. The other option that I'm pursuing is obviously to work with the UK Government to see if they will work with me on devolving powers to Scotland so that I can pursue tighter regulations on the sale of fireworks. So in terms of both those options, I think it would be, in terms of the timing, I think it would be unlikely that I would be able to progress legislative change in the next year of this Parliament. But I will, of course, keep the member updated on the timetable.
Shona Robertson, to be followed by Alexander Stewart.
During the very first session of the very first Parliament, I tried to bring forward a Members' Bill entitled Bombs by Any Other Name to do exactly some of the work that the Minister has announced today, which is very, very welcome indeed. Can the Minister say whether or not her thinking is along the lines potentially some kind of licensing system, and what would the role of local government be within that? Is that something that she's considering or something that she would consider?
I think the member puts it very well when she calls it bombs by any other names, because that in many cases is exactly what it is. I think the area that the member raises, the idea of a licensing system, if the member is referring to that by way of controlling the sale of fireworks, then that is certainly something that I would be considering, something that I'd be very interested and I'm already starting to speak to the UK Government Minister about. I think if that could be devolved to Scotland, that is certainly something that we would look at, and I think that would go a long way, certainly in terms of the legislative approach, to creating an environment that would mean that we would change this relationship with fireworks and lead to more responsible use of fireworks.
Alexander Stewart, to be followed by Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I note from the statement that a firework review group will be established and chaired by Alistair Hay, the former Chief Officer of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and I welcome that appointment. Can I ask the Minister to clarify when that review group will meet, what its remit will be, and who will make up the membership of the review group?
Minister.
Thank the member for that question. So the review group will actually begin meeting as soon as possible. I envisage it will meet for the first time within the next month or so. It will meet for approximately 9 months. We haven't exactly finalised the total, the exact numbers of people who will be on there, but I would imagine it will involve all the stakeholders that have already shown an interest in this and have expertise in this area. So that would obviously include animal charity representatives, the NHS, obviously the emergency services, the fireworks industry representatives themselves as well. So all interested stakeholders, I would imagine, to take part in that, and I'm very pleased that Ali Hay, formerly the Chief Officer of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, has agreed to chair it, and I would expect it to report back to me in the summer next year with its recommendations, and I will be happy to come back to Parliament at that time to discuss that further.
Fulton McGregor, to be followed by Rhoda Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the Minister's statement today and also the overwhelming response to the Scottish Government's consultation. The Minister has mentioned already the positive engagement she's had with the UK Government on this issue. So does she share my view that the relevant powers should be devolved to this Parliament as soon as possible and following the overwhelming consultation responses calling for stronger regulations in fireworks?
Minister.
I do. I've written to the UK Government regularly. I wanted to make sure that I was keeping them informed about what we were doing in Scotland, and I've ensured that I've kept the Minister for Small Business, Consumers and Corporate Responsibility, Kelly Tolhurst, up to speed with the consultation and also with the outcome of the consultation. So I last received a reply from her on the 15th of October, and I'm very keen to meet with her perhaps early in the new year to discuss how we go forward on this. That said, the UK Government have made quite clear that there is quite a limited appetite, I think that would be fair to characterise it, to change the legislation around the sale, something that was most recently dismissed in the House of Commons by Jacob Rees-Mogg. I think that was just a couple of weeks ago. He was responding to a question from Alison Thewlis MP. So I think that that approach is probably not one that we would want to replicate in Scotland. I'm very keen that Scotland does address this issue head on, and I'm also very keen that Scotland lead the way as usual in this area.
Rhoda Grant, to be followed by Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Restrictions on fireworks sales, however welcome, put pressure on staff working in retail outlets that sell fireworks. What support is the Scottish Government giving to workers who face abuse when challenging underage purchasers and when promoting best practice?
I think the member makes a very good point there. We obviously rely on retailers to uphold the law in this area and not to sell fireworks to people who are underage. And I would certainly, you know, that if people are being attacked in the course of carrying out their normal duties, obviously that is deplorable and we do not accept that behaviour. There is obviously legislation that covers that already. And you know, perpetrators of that type of behaviour would be dealt with robustly by the courts. I think if the member has ideas and suggestions on how we might do more in this area to support them, I'd be very glad to have a meeting with her to discuss that further.
Rona Mackay.
Presiding Officer, as highlighted during the Minister's statement, the distress that fireworks can have on people with autism is widely known. But does the Minister agree that this research has shown that the distress caused is simply unacceptable and must be addressed as soon as possible?
Minister.
I think the member raises a very important point. It certainly came through very strongly in the themes of the consultation, the autism, people with underlying mental health issues, veterans and animals as well, the loud noises that fireworks can, and the conditions that those create can be very frightening to a number of people. The consultation highlighted that very, very clearly, so that is something that came across very strongly. One of the things that we're doing, of course, is the awareness-raising campaign. So one of the campaigns that we're running is just to highlight to people that even when you're using fireworks and you're not using them in an appropriate way, it can still have a large impact on the communities around you. So we'd like people to take that into consideration when they're using fireworks. But I'm committed to ensuring that the views of people who have autism continue to be reflected, and that they will be reflected in the review group as well, and make sure that they have representation on there as we progress through looking at the options that we're able to use, and also hopefully that will be reflected in the recommendations that come out of this as we move forward.
Thank you very much, and apologies, I'm afraid, to Bill Bowman and to Stuart Macmillan, as we have not got enough time this afternoon to get through all the business. Otherwise, we will overrun to the next debate. So we're going